Hello and welcome to the BucketLister Podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford, along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the BucketLister Podcast. I am back today chatting with Jake Field. Hello Jake.
Hi Keith.
And today we are going to be switching it over because Jake's going to take the lead and interview me on my recent trip out to Tanzania, where I've been on a safari with a bucket list group. It's the first one that we have run in the sense of a dedicated safari. We've done loads of safaris in Tanzania before as an add-on for people who have been doing Kilimanjaro or our cycle ride trip, but we've never actually done a specific safari trip that was a dedicated safari. And I had a real mixture of people on the trip because I had a family, I had a couple, I had solo travelers, so it was nice to kind of bring everybody together. But rather than me just going on about the safari, I will hand over to Jake so he can kind of ask me some questions and we can talk through the safari itself. So Jake, take my seat, take it away.
Well, I've got loads of questions. I'm actually going to struggle to try and keep it to time, and we won't end up going on for ages and ages and ages. But honestly, I think a safari in Africa has been on so many people's bucket lists. It's definitely been on mine. It's not something that I've really gone out and done yet. So as usual, I'm going to be asking you all the questions that I want to know, in the hopes that, you know, one day if you start slowing down, I'll jump on and take the next trip out on the Tanzania safari. But I suppose in terms of the main ones, then, so talk us through what happens when you land. Do you land and do you go straight on safari? Loads and loads of groups that I've heard of, and they'll get picked up at the airport and they'll be straight in a Jeep going out on safari. But how did it work for you?
No, so it is a long trip to go on to a safari from a flight perspective. So, you know, you do spend, the one thing I will say to people is if you are going on safari, be prepared to spend quite a lot of time sat in a vehicle. That's one of the biggest things. So when we designed this trip, we thought it was important to, after a long flight, just to have a bit of a chill and a bit of a relax, and also see some of the other parts of Tanzania as well. So when we landed in Kilimanjaro International Airport, and then we went to our normal base in Moshi, where we sort of base ourselves for all of our Tanzanian trips. And we stayed at the Wuru Lodge, which is really nice. And it's a really nice hotel where you've just got time to chill out. And if you're lucky enough, you're at the foothills of Kilimanjaro, and Kilimanjaro pokes itself out of the clouds sometimes. And it did for us, which was really nice. So we actually spent 3 nights at Wuru before we started. So we arrived in the evening, spent the night there. The second day we went and had a tour of Moshi, and it was nice that Whitey, our head guide for Kili, was able to come over and see us and be with us for a couple of days. I mean, he knows what a lion is and he knows what a giraffe is, but he certainly knows safari guide. So we had him for a couple of days. So we went and did a tour of Moshi in the morning, then came back and just had the afternoon chilling out at the hotel. People had time to, jump in the pool, read a book, just kind of like start to enjoy their trip a little bit, really. Then what would then be the second day of the trip, or the third day from when you flew, we then went up to the coffee plantations and the waterfalls, which is about an hour's drive from the lodge. And that's kind of a whole day out. Stretch your legs. It takes you about 45 minutes to walk up to the waterfalls. A few of them had a quick swim in the waterfalls, which was really nice. I didn't go in. It looked a bit cold for me.
But I remember doing it a couple of years ago. Before I went up Kilimanjaro, we had a bit of a day to go and enjoy, and they gave us a couple of options, and I went and did the coffee plantation, the waterfall tour, and I did jump in, and you're right, it was really, really cold.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you have got to walk back a little bit wet. I didn't take a change of clothes, so I would say if anyone is going to go and do that, taking a change of clothes in town is a very good idea.
They did take a change of clothes. I think the thing that got me is I'd never been there before. It's the first time I've been. But
yeah, it's cool.
It's a really high waterfall in terms of like, I didn't expect it. And, I always like that, the Timotei advert of when you're stood under the waterfall in like washing your hair. Like I always think that makes quite a good picture. But when I looked at it, like the water was coming down from such a height that I think it was either going to give me a headache or knock me out. So that was my main reason for
I did. Yeah, I've had one person on my trip. This was a little while ago, and he went under the waterfall, and he instantly tried to come back out because he was like, the speed that it comes down and the weight of the water. I don't think you really appreciate how much water is coming down, but it's quite an incredible thing to see, and it is really powerful. It's it's one of those moments that you don't forget.
Yeah, and then we walked back and went and did the coffee tour, and it was really interesting. I found it much better than I thought I was going to be honest. Like they took it from taking the beans off a tree right through to roasting the beans to then making you a cup of coffee.
I loved it. I think I learned so much more than I ever thought. I genuinely, I didn't know there was that much to it. And I think one of the things that they end up saying that I've carried with me forever is they say like you can tell like coffee's not supposed to be bitter really is what he was saying. And, a lot of it depends on when they've harvested the beans or whether they've actually roasted the beans for too long. Like there's all of these, subtle things that make a big difference in the flavor and the taste.
Yeah, and it was interesting to understand like the quality of the coffee. I mean, I'm a big coffee drinker. Like most guides are big coffee drinkers.
I'm a big coffee drinker.
You need to learn to live on it to keep yourself going through the days. But it was understanding that actually there are some trees that you only harvest once a year that give the best coffee, but most of the coffee that people drink around the world these days is from trees where they'll get 2 harvests a year because they're hybrid trees rather than Arabica trees and like all of this stuff that I just.
And do you still have all like the traditional equipment and processing and things like none of it's modern? It's all
all like hand. You were doing it by hand and you were crushing them with a big stick.
Because I have now seen a video of you taking part and do you want to talk us through what you were doing?
Well, yeah, we just literally took it from, you had to like the coffee bean is actually inside 3 different husks, if you like, and you have to get them out and you just use a big stick to do it. And yeah, it was like, and then we got to roast it. And then, we got to on an open fire. And I think the amazing thing was obviously I've got a climbing center in the UK. We've got a coffee, climbers like coffee. And we go through a lot of coffee. And it was when I asked the guy, like, how much coffee do they produce a year at this coffee plantation? And they produced enough to keep my cafe going for a year. And that was it. That was literally like the amount that they would produce would be enough of what I would buy in a year. So I'm trying to do a little bit of a deal now to see if they'll be my, supplier of coffee and they can just deal direct with me. But so that was really good. That was like, and by the time we got back to the lodge, that was pretty much a full day tour as well. And like everyone really enjoyed it. The family got loads out of it. And I think it was so nice having a family on the trip. Like everyone got on really well on the trip. And it was just so nice to see this family, like taking their children on a trip like this to go on safari as an education. They were having a brilliant time and enjoying it, but actually what they would have learned from going on that trip is, you certainly don't get that in Benidorm, put it that way.
No, exactly. So, okay. So you finished at the coffee plantation. That was sort of the end. That's quite a full day with the waterfall and the coffee tour and things like that, but really, really well worth it. And then What did you do the next day? What did you have planned?
So then we were starting on safari. So we left the hotel, packed up all our bags, and loaded them onto the safari trucks. There were 8 of us in total, so we ended up with 2 safari trucks. So the family had 1 safari truck to themselves. The rest of us were in the other safari truck. And then we took it's about a 4-hour drive down to Tarangire National Park. And that's where we had our first game drive. And we had that in the afternoon. Saw, again, loads of stuff. Like, the people in my truck were really surprised because as soon as we drove through the gate to the safari park, I was like, oh, monkeys, elephants, giraffe. And they were like, what? We at least thought we'd have to drive like somewhere before we started seeing something. But that particular park is really known for its elephants. There are loads of elephants in that park. That really is what it's known for. So we did have.
That's where we had the most incredible experience on the cycling safari that I did a couple of years ago. And I'm not gonna go off track and start talking about that, but in the sense of, I was genuinely amazed at how many elephants you see and how close they get as well.
Yeah. No, it's just, and that's the thing. I think it is just, you are in their natural habitat. It's not like going to a zoo or to Longleat Safari Park where you're driving your car around. Like, you are in their natural environment.
Other safari parks are available.
Yeah, they are.
Quick disclaimer in there.
But again, the experience you get on a real safari is second to none with that. And then we went.
And you spend the night there, don't you?
We came out of the safari park, and we had about safari park. We came out of the national park, not in the safari
right.
Park.
Yeah.
We came out of the national park, and we had about a 40-minute drive to our lodge that night. And the lodge was stunning. It was safari tents, but these tents are huge. You've got an ensuite bathroom in the back of there. Like, you've got double beds. It looks like a hotel room in a tent. You wouldn't, from when you're inside, you wouldn't think that you were in a tent. And yeah, it was really funny at that one because, and I haven't had this before when I've been on safari, but they were like, when we had our little briefing, when we checked in, they were like, okay, there's no fence to this park, to this lodge. So you need to pick up the phone and give us a call, and we will bring an armed guard down to escort you back to the dining room, and you'll have to be escorted back to the dining room.
Yeah, so I had the same on the cycling thing. It's quite bizarre.
That was quite cool. And the guy, when they said an armed guard, the guy turned up with a stick, and I was a bit like, "What are you going to do with a stick if a lion comes?" And I was like, this probably. And I was like, "When was the last time you really saw anything?" And he was like, "Yeah, we had a lion in camp last night." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I am gonna stand
stick with you
then." Like, and we stayed there for a night. The following morning, because we had such a long drive, we had a bit of a chilled out morning. They had a lovely swimming pool at the lodge, like an infinity pool that looked out over a watering hole. And the elephants came up in the morning and, were drinking and washing. And you were sort of just sat there in this infinity pool looking out over them doing their thing.
That just doesn't sound real.
Yeah,
that's crazy. I've seen the pictures and I'm so incredibly jealous. It
was really cool in terms of that. And then we had a hot lunch in the lodge, and the food across the whole trip was just amazing. Like, all the lodges were just so nice. I think the thing with this trip is we've kind of upped the game in terms of accommodation levels, maybe from our normal trips that we do. In terms of, it's not a tea house. It's not when we say you're in a tent, it certainly isn't a tent. But a safari is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I think, we pretty much hit the nail on the head with where we were staying in what we were doing. So the following afternoon, once we'd had our cooked lunch, we went up to Lake Manyara and we did the treetop walk in Lake Manyara. That was really cool. They've got kind of a bit of a high ropes course, not quite a high ropes course, where you're kind of up in the canopy and you're just wandering across all these bridges, and there's monkeys swinging from the trees and stuff like that. That was really cool. And then we went to our next lodge. From there, the following morning, we came back down into Lake Manyara and had a game drive around Lake Manyara, and then proceeded to drive up towards the Ngorongoro crater and stayed in a lodge just outside of the Ngorongoro crater for the night. That lodge was absolutely stunning. It was just on another level. It was like in a coffee plantation. You kind of felt like you had jungle all around you. Like the rooms were massive. Lovely.
Yeah, I've stayed there. It's really cool. It's a brilliant lodge.
Yeah, lots of and the nice thing about it was that when we got there, that we didn't expect was that all your beer was included, which was a really nice surprise when we arrived. They said we were on the drinks package and you could have free beer and champagne, so that perked everybody up a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the following day we went into the Ngorongoro crater, which is my favorite most place in the world, I think, to go on to safari. I mean, the ecosystem in that crater is just amazing. The fact that they think at one point that was higher than Kilimanjaro before it imploded into the crater is just and the thing I love about the Ngorongoro is, like, when you're up looking down into the crater, you can't really see anything. And literally, as you start driving down into the crater, like, you just suddenly start to pick out all of the animals, like, and they suddenly become into view. And it just, like, everyone on my bus was like, this is just like a scene from Jurassic Park. Like, it feels like I'm in Jurassic Park. And we spent a good couple of hours going around the crater, saw lions. We managed to see a rhino. Unfortunately, it was through binoculars. It was quite a distance away. But we did manage to tick that one off the big 5 list. And I think by that point we had seen, before we even went to the Serengeti, we had seen the big 5. So, that was really cool from that respect. And then once we came out of the crater, it was then time to head up to the Serengeti, which I was really looking forward to, because I'd done all those 3 parks before, but I'd never been to the Serengeti. That had always been on my list of things to go and do. And it is a long, dusty drive to get to the Serengeti. Like, it is probably the bumpiest, dustiest road that you will spend time on to get up there. And it's just literally safari truck after safari truck going in both directions, moving between the two. Like, that is your way of getting to the Serengeti. So we arrived at the lodge quite late. The next morning, we were going to go and see the migration and go to the crossing and see the migration. And again, that's something that's been on my bucket list for, I'm a keen photographer. You've seen all the safari photos. You kind of just, you can't put it into words what you kind of see. And the guys we had driving us were just brilliant. Like, they were so informative, like, would answer all of your questions. They really did know what they were talking about. And we got to the crossing, or just before we got to the crossing, we just had this long line of wildebeest, and everyone was like, wow, that's amazing. And then we kind of drove for another like 20 minutes, and there were just wildebeest everywhere. Like, you could not get, like, you wouldn't even have to put a number on it. And then our Deo, our driver, he was saying, well, by October, there'll be 500,000 wildebeest here. Wow. Like, and, unfortunately, nature's nature, and they're literally all going, and you're literally on the Kenyan border, and there's a river, and you're literally like sat there waiting for them to cross the river. And between now and October, they just cross the river, come back, cross the river, come back. Wow. And then eventually in October, once they're all there, then they will move into Kenya for a couple of months before they then come back again. But, you know, like I say, I couldn't put a number on how many wildebeest we saw that day. But to think how far out we still are from October, like for there to be 500,000 wildebeest around that area, like that would be a real sight to see. But yeah, that was a brilliant day. Unfortunately, we didn't see them crossing the river. We didn't see any getting attacked by a crocodile or anything like that. You know, but again, nature's nature, and you can never predict, you know, what's going to happen on those days. But yeah, that was a really cool day to go and see that. And then on the way back, came back a different way, which was really nice because we were going through little villages. And the kids were all coming out of school and waving to us, and like everyone really enjoyed that because on the way there, you were just going across the Serengeti and you didn't see another person, but it was kind of nice to come back another way and see actually when you just come out of that a little bit, then, you know, there is real life there. And, you know, these people are sharing their communities with the animals and stuff. That day was really long. So the next day we just chilled out in the morning. The group had kind of wanted to have a lay in. We had quite a lot of early mornings to go on game drives and stuff like that. So yeah, the group were like, no, we'll have a nice leisurely breakfast. We'll have lunch and then we'll head out on a game drive in the afternoon. And we were staying at the same place then. So it was quite nice. You could kind of unpack a little bit and have your room for longer than a night, really. So that was really nice. Again, the lodge was lovely, right in the middle of the Serengeti. Like you just sat up on the terrace and looked down and you could just see elephants walking past. And there must have been about, it was really on our way there to the lodge. We were coming back like quite late, and it was dark. We had our lights on, and there was a huge buffalo in the road. And then the next minute, this little buffalo arrived. And the buffalo had just literally been born. Like the umbilical cord was still there. Like it was, wow. It was minutes old, I reckon. It couldn't even stand up properly. It was all wobbly and shaky. And we were trying to get back past them. But the little buffalo was so inquisitive. He kept coming up and like looking at the vans because he just, you know, had no clue. And the mum had kind of walked off, and this little baby was just sort of in the middle of the road, like wobbling on itself, like not getting out the way and sort of coming up and smelling the vans and stuff like that. So, and then the next night we were all sat there watching the sunset, and it must have been about 100 buffalo, like were walking along below us. And then when you got the binoculars out, you could properly see this little one at the back of the group because he was still really wobbly and like not properly on his feet. So that like everyone like thought that was an amazing experience. And again, yeah, that's the thing with a safari. You need to be in the right place at the right time. Like nothing's gonna, you can't predict anything really. Then we went out for a game drive that afternoon. Went down and saw the hippo pools. Like someone in the group, their favorite animal was a hippo. So they wanted in. So the drivers took us down to one of the big hippo pools, and that was quite cool. There was just like 100 hippos in this pool, and so that was great. And then it was time to head back then to Moshi the following day. But obviously, because you are in the middle of the Serengeti, you kind of get another game drive out of it as you're driving out of the park. And probably that was the best experience we had, because literally as we were driving out towards the park, there was just a male and a female lion just sat there like meters from us, like in perfect view. And that was the closest we had got to lions the whole trip. And that just happened on the way home.
And these are the pictures that you've sent over.
Yeah. Those two.
Yeah. So we're going to be putting some of those pictures up on our socials and things like that. So for anyone who's interested in seeing those pictures, I mean, they are genuinely one of the best pictures of lions that I've ever seen. And I'm not one for giving you compliments all the time, but
Yeah.
you've smashed it on that one. It's a really, really incredible photo. So yeah, head over onto our Instagram page and things like that, and you'll be able to see the photos that Keith got of that. So in terms of obviously all the animals,
that's why, Jake, I lead these trips and you don't. Like when you can replicate the photos.
I will. Do you know what? I will give you that. You are particularly good at sitting in a pool and taking photos and drinking beer and champagne on an all-inclusive package. I'll bow down to you on that one.
What can I say? There's some things we're good at and some things we're not.
But so it sounds like you had so many close encounters and you had so many kind of experiences with all the different animals. But I mean, are there any that really stand out for you? Obviously the lions is going to be one of them, but on a whole, would you say you had more close encounters than far encounters, or what did that look like?
Elephants coming right up to the to the trucks walking past us.
Wow.
Yeah, like giraffes everywhere, zebra, giraffe. Like in the end, you're kind of like, the day when we saw the wildebeest, it was kind of like, okay, we don't need to stop to see any more wildebeest now. We've kind of we've ticked wildebeest off now. And you do get to the point where you're like, okay, yeah, there's another zebra. Like, but you are still looking like, you still have your eyes open because you just want those experiences like we had with the lions on the last day. Like you don't want to, I mean, like we saw.
You don't want to miss out, do you? You
don't want to miss out. Like we saw a leopard in a tree. It was, they are hard to spot on safari anyway. They match the color of the grass and they're very difficult to see. But we saw one asleep in a tree. You had to have binoculars to see it, but it was, again, such a great thing to see this leopard just asleep in the tree. And it was such a good spot. I'll put my hand up. It wasn't me that spotted it. But whoever it was that spotted it, it was definitely a good spot on that point. And we all managed to get a good look at it. So what
was the closest that you ever got to an animal on the safari? Then?
Well,
is there anything that stands out?
You know the story where I'm going to come from now. And I did get very, very close to a baboon one morning. And it was not one that I want to repeat, to be honest.
Right. In
fact, I am changing the kit list for the safari trip to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else again.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was in one of the safari tents. And we were up in the Serengeti, and on the safari tents, you kind of have two doors. You have your big, thick canvas door, and then behind it, you have your mesh door, your fly net door. So I'd gone to bed that night, shut it all down, shut both zips. That was fine. And I'm lying there in bed in the morning, and it's almost time that, when you're just like, my alarm's going to go off in a minute, and you're kind of just sat there in a sort of like a bit of a dazed sort of situation. And next minute, the zip starts opening. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe they come round in the morning and just open up the outer zip because it's quite difficult to open them up. Maybe they just,
bring you a cup of coffee, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, every night you have turn down service where they come in and get your room ready and they put your mosquito nets around your bed and do all that. So I was like, well, maybe this is like turn up service, like rather than turn down service. And I'm laying there in bed, and then the next minute there's this almighty crash, and this baboon comes straight through the bottom of the zip and into my room. Now, this was a male baboon. It was a very large male baboon, and he comes straight up to my bed and eyeballs me through the mosquito netting, which obviously isn't going to do anything if he decides that he wants to jump into bed with me. So obviously, again, you're supposed to ring the reception for an escort.
The guy with the stick.
Yeah, the guy with the stick. And then he goes to the end of my bed, and I've literally got my laptop, my camera, like everything was like charging on the desk. And he starts picking things up from the desk. And I'm like, in a minute, he's just going to literally swipe everything off my desk and smash my camera. And like, then he wanders off into my bathroom. And I'm like, right, now's my chance. So I pick up the phone and I like rang the hotel reception. And I was like, there's a baboon in my room. And they were like, oh, okay, we'll send somebody down. And it was just so blasé, like as if, you've just asked for an extra towel or something like that. And I'm like, and I stupidly didn't get a photo. But to be honest, I really was quite scared. Like it would,
Yeah, they can be really vicious.
Yeah. And I was more kind of keeping an eye on where he was. And my phone was on my bed somewhere because I was waiting for my alarm to go off. And then literally like out of the blue, he just like managed to get back out the hole that he came in again. And I jumped out of bed and shut my tent up and like, but I went outside and went onto the balcony bit of the tent, and the guys next door to me who were in the group, I hadn't put two and two together, but I'd heard Hannah like shriek about 2 minutes before the zip started opening in my tent. So I was like, I wonder if the baboon had got into their tent as well. And Hannah and James were out on their balcony. I was like, did you have a visitor this morning? And Hannah was like, yeah. He turned up, poked his head in, saw me, and then scarpered. And I was like, oh, lucky you. She went, whoa, what happened to you? I said, well, he didn't scarper from me. He just kept coming straight in. Like, but yeah, so that was
maybe he likes the look of you. Maybe that's what it was.
Well, or he didn't once he'd actually got in and saw me lying in bed. But yeah, it was
God.
It was a moment that I don't want to replicate. So in terms now is like, make sure you have a small padlock that, like a suitcase padlock that you can lock your zips together in the morning or in the evening before you go to bed, so they can't then get into your tent. So that's how I'm changing my
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Yeah. So that was the closest encounter I had. And then we turned and then we got back to Moshi. And then I flew back out the next day, but all of the rest of the guys had booked on to go and have a Zanzibar extension. So then they headed to Zanzibar and I came back because I'm back out to Kilimanjaro next week for a Kilimanjaro climb. So I thought, I better come home and do some work rather than having another 4 days.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying. No, so what? I suppose, so you mentioned about the long drives and things like that. Do you have any top tips for people in terms of things that they should bring or how they can better, enjoy their time on the long drives? I mean, obviously you're seeing lots of things, so it's quite engaging, and the time I imagine would end up going quite quickly. But do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think most people, either try catching up with sleep because you are up early in the mornings and stuff. Obviously, some of the roads were that bumpy, there is no way you would get any sleep. Right. A lot of people just put their headphones in and chilled out, listen to a podcast, listen to music, listen to an audio book. One of the guys in my truck managed to read a book. How you manage to read a book when you're bouncing around, I don't know, but she was quite happily reading a book. You do have plenty of stops. Like, you're probably going for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then you will have a stop, get out, go to the toilet, stretch your legs. But Tanzania is such a big place. And if you want to go and see these things, then you really need to, be prepared to travel, really. I mean, I have, and like I said, this is the first time we've done this trip. And for the next one, I've already made a few tweaks to the itinerary for it because actually it makes far more sense, having now done it and seen the drive to the Serengeti, not to do the Ngorongoro crater on the way, is to do the Ngorongoro crater on the way back and then split that journey up on the way back.
Okay. Yeah, nice. Because it's a few hours from the Ngorongoro crater back to Moshi, whereas in comparison,
it's about 5 hours back, depending on traffic. And the thing is, in Tanzania, is it's not necessarily the distances you're traveling; it's the speed at which you're traveling. Like if you were doing those distances in the UK, it'd be a 2 hour drive. Unless you're in London, maybe. But if you were like around, it would be a 2 hour drive. But over there, because of the slow lorries and the roads and this, that, and the other,
I think they're also restricted to so even though you've got big, long, open roads, I think they are actually restricted in how far.
Yeah, so they're restricted to 80 kilometers an hour on the safari trucks. So
that's it.
But there are lorries going up hills a lot slower than 80 kilometers an hour that you then get stuck behind and you can't overtake for a long time. And so it does just take a lot longer to get around places. So but you get to see stuff. You're seeing a different country. Tips on things would be to be wearing dark clothes. Like, it is very dusty. Like, you certainly don't want to be wearing fresh white tops because they will not be fresh white by the time you finish the journey. Like in the safari truck, there's always plenty of water in there. There's a fridge in the safari truck. So you just, every time you want to drink, you can grab yourself a drink. Obviously binoculars are a must have, a good set of binoculars. I obviously have my camera with me. Most other people kind of just had their phones, which, for a lot of it was good enough. It was when stuff was slightly further away and then you couldn't kind of get the zoom on it. So depending what you want out of your trip, obviously, two people have already asked me for prints of those lion photos because they want to put them on their wall. Like, if you want to be getting some decent photos, then you really do need to be taking a good camera with, a very good zoom lens on it. Ultimately, I had thought about buying a new one before I went out and decided against it. I probably regret that decision now somewhat. Like, I wish I had bought a new, bigger lens because there would have been some stuff like that leopard in the tree, for example. If I'd had a bigger lens, I would have been able to get that. Obviously, plenty of batteries for your cameras. Plenty of memory cards because you do go through them really quickly. It took me about 15 hours to upload all of the video in photos to you guys yesterday from the trip. So I did take an awful lot of photos. Like, obviously, a safari hat. You want a hat because quite often as you're driving along, you could be driving along all day with the roof popped open, and therefore you are open to the elements. It is warm. You want some cool clothing. Like, we had a couple of super hot days. Like, you're pretty much right on the equator there. So it is a different heat. It's not a humid heat. It's a very direct heat. So, make sure you've got plenty of sun cream. Insect repellent's a big one. There are lots of creepy crawlies and flies and flying things when you're on a safari. So, but obviously, if we give you a full kit list, the only thing I'm going to add to it is the padlock for the baboon safety. But,
brilliant. Well, honestly, it just sounds like the most incredible trip. And I suppose then for people who are listening to this podcast as it gets released, for those that have set their reminders for being notified when we release a new episode, when's the best time to book a Tanzanian safari, or what's the best time of year to look at going on safari?
Obviously, again, if you are looking at this one is obviously set to go to the migration, to see the migration. So obviously we offer two different types of safaris at the Bucket List Company. We've got the add-on version, which is tagged on to the end of your Kilimanjaro trip or your cycling trip. That covers the three first national parks. So Lake Manyara, Ngorongoro and Tarangire. They're all really good national parks, not as far away as the Serengeti. So you can do that in the 3-day extension. That can pretty much happen anytime you want to go on it. The ultimate safari one, which is the one that I've just come back from, obviously that one is designed to go to the migration. So in reality, you're kind of wanting to be going August, September, beginning of October time, really, any time within there. Preferably August and September if you want to go up and see that migration. would be the time that you would want to go and do that one.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very, very much for answering all those questions. Like I say, it is one of those trips where I could end up speaking about it for hours and hours and hours, and I probably will over the next couple of weeks keep asking you questions as the pictures come in. And I think that's a great idea with a little padlock to stop the baboons.
To keep my friendly baboon away, yeah. But obviously, if you are interested, this podcast will be going out on Wednesday, the 30th of August, and we have got an offer on at the minute for the Safari add-on until the end of August. Whereas if you book any Kilimanjaro trip or Kili cycle trip, you can add the Safari onto your package for half price. So you save like £550, but you have got to get that in by the 31st of August at 10 p.m. So if you're listening to this after that, we're very sorry. But the offer does run out on the 31st of August. So, Jake, thanks ever so much for stepping in and interviewing me today. It was an amazing trip, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and can't wait to go back again with a bigger lens this time, and do the trip again. So thanks for stepping in. Thanks for questioning me. Hopefully you've all enjoyed it and have found it interesting. If you've got a safari on your bucket list, then do check out the ultimate safari that we do. Obviously, Africa is very famous for its safaris. You've got Kenya, you've got Tanzania, you've got South Africa. There are lots of options for you there. We've had people on this one who have been on the South African safari, and they said they saw far more in Tanzania than they did in South Africa. I think the lodges are on a different level in Tanzania. They are amazing. So, do have a look. And if you've got any questions, please get in contact with the office and they can sort it out. And the nice thing about the safari is, although we have got dedicated dates for departures, if you wanted a private safari, then obviously this is something we can organise for you as well on your set dates. If you want to mix and match your itinerary, if you want us to put together something completely different for you, then that is completely possible as well. They certainly suit families. And yeah, if a safari is on your bucket list, then please do get in contact. And we can look to put together a quote or a package for you, and you certainly won't be disappointed with it either. So thanks ever so much for listening. Hope you've enjoyed the episode, and I'll be back next week with another episode of the BucketLister Podcast. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the BucketLister Podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.